My name is Pat Snyder, and I want to talk to you about personifying the disease. This is one of the 5 choices that you can make to have a more gentle caregiver experience when your loved one has dementia. There are 5 things that I recommend people do. We're going to focus on one of those today. But the first one is be positive, be proactive, be perceptive, be persistent, and then the 5th one, personify the disease. And we're going to talk about what that means because I'm sure that might be puzzling to many of you. So let's go into what that's all about. This has to do a lot of times when your loved one is having some sort of behavior. They're saying something, they're doing something that's puzzling to you or hurtful to you or to someone you love. They're just not acting like they would have normally acted before dementia came into your story. So what can you do that can make a difference so that not only your loved one is better taken care of, but you're taking better care of yourself at the same time? So let's go into that a little bit and see what personify the disease means. When my husband John was first diagnosed by Dr. Coffer at UNC Chapel Hill, Dr. Coffer said that he wanted our primary goal throughout this journey to be to preserve John's personhood, to preserve his personhood. And I decided early on that in order to meet that goal, I needed to separate John from the disease. I needed to make a difference in my own mind and my own heart between nurturing John and outsmarting this disease. I need to see them almost as 2 different people, almost as if there were a 3rd person in the room, and my job was to outsmart that person. So let's dig into this a little bit and find out what I mean by separating the disease from your loved one. To preserve John's dignity, I gave that disease a personal kind of name, and his diagnosis was Lewy body dementia. So it was very easy to do find a name for that. I called the disease Lewy. And I saw Lewy as, like I said, another person in the room. Lewy was my enemy. Lewy was a monster. Lewy was trying to kill John. Lewy would like to kill me along with John because many caregivers don't make the whole journey with their loved one. Many of them do pass away in the middle of this because of all the stress that the monster Lewy can create. Now, when you're naming your monster at your house, pick a name that fits maybe for you and that works for you and for your family. Lewy worked for us, and it's what Lewy body dementia caregivers often do use. It's a common name for us. But the main thing was whenever something happened that seemed to be not what John would normally have done, not kind, not good, not something you wanted, you blame it on Lewy. Because guess what? Lewy's at fault. So I separated the actions from John from those that originated from the disease. And I did this so that I could shun or ignore what was going on. I could redirect the conversation, and I'm going to tell you some stories about that in a little bit so you can see what that's like in real life. But I made a decision not to feed the monster. I'm not going to feed this monster by responding to it. I'm going to outsmart the monster. And it gave me emotional distance. Now, emotional distance from that situation allowed me to think more clearly. It allowed me to problem solve better. It allowed me to respond kindly to John. And this preserved his personhood. So I was meeting the overall, the dynamic and most important goal, preserving the personhood of this person that I loved so very much. Now, there may be some things that you can do. Let me tell you a story that involves improv acting. I always love to tell this story when I'm speaking to groups. We had a caregiver John had a caregiver named Dana. Dana was about 45 years old. She was an attractive single lady. We both came to love her very much. John got a crush on Dana. And one day, he was sitting in the family room, and Dana was doing something in the kitchen, and I was bringing in some sort of treat for John. And when I walked into the room, our family room is at the other end of the house, I walked into the family room, and just happy and excited about being with John, and he turns to me and he says, "We didn't mean for it to happen." I'm like, "You didn't mean for it to happen?" "No, we didn't mean for it to happen." "Well, hon, what's up? What do you mean?" "We're going out west together." "Oh, you're going out west together." "Oh, out west. I remember when we went out west and took the kids, and we went hiking in Zion National Park, and we saw the Grand Canyon together and just all those beautiful sights." And John went, "Yeah." And that event was over. That's improv acting. Improv acting is when someone gives you a statement of some sort, and you simply take that statement and you go with it. And you can redirect the conversation very easily. Notice that I repeated it, gave me time to think, gave me time to process. I repeated it, and then I simply redirected the conversation to a very pleasant memory. I was reminiscing. I wasn't asking him to remember. I was just reminiscing, and he was able to join me in that, and then completely forget the conversation about going out of town with Dana and going out west together. I went in later and said to Dana, "Did you realize you and John were going out west together?" And of course she was floored, and we had a big laugh over it. Another thing, though, that was a part of that I just want to make sure you understand was doing things ahead of time so you don't have to be concerned with those moments if you can be emotionally threatened by those. I already had the healthcare power of attorney. I already had the power of attorney. The house was already in my name. I had done those legal things that need to be done. The will was taken care of. All that stuff was in place. I didn't have to be threatened or worried at all about some woman coming and taking my husband out west and stealing everything we had. That just wasn't going to happen. So some of this also is being prepared ahead of time. But pertinent to this conversation, I wanted you to see an example of what improv acting is and how it works and how easily you can diffuse what might be an explosive emotional situation if you handled it in another way. Obviously, if your husband normally said to you that he was going out west with someone who was working in your house, the wife would not respond well to that. That's not this situation. We're dealing with dementia here. We're dealing with a brain that's now impaired. It's not working the way it normally did. And separating that disease from the person and simply being gentle with the person and outsmarting the disease can sometimes actually be a lot of fun. So, the technique also worked well with the grandchildren. They really were able to embrace this concept of Lewy. And they could say to themselves, "That's just that mean old Lewy talking right now. Pops would never speak to me like that. Pops loves me." And we could say that to them, and they would agree. Or we would say to them, "Leave the room if Pops looks mad, or if he says something to you that's mean. That's just that mean old Lewy. That's not Pops. Go back in a little while, and he'll be back. He'll be fine, and you'll be fine." So the grandchildren embraced that. It gave them someone to blame. Lewy was the enemy, not their Pops who loved them so deeply. It equipped them and empowered them to handle things so much better. So this works well with the grandchildren. Before I tell you another story, another brief story, I do want to mention that early on in our journey, I did say to John, You know, hon, you have Lewy bodies, these clumps in your brain. You have this going on. I don't. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you through the whole thing. Can you use my brain as your second brain? Can you do that for me? Can you trust me so that I can tell you when things are going on and you can trust that? Will you try? Fortunately, John embraced that, and because he did over and over again, it made things so much easier. Here's an example of that. One day, well into the journey, John was already in hospice care. He was bedridden. He was way, way into it. And he tried to speak. He was trying to speak to me, and only gibberish came out. Now, Lewy body dementia, for those of you who are not familiar with it, or for those of you who are new to it, it's a roller coaster. It's not like Alzheimer's. You're up and down, and symptoms come and go, and sometimes they're intense, and sometimes they disappear, and sometimes they're mild. They come back, they don't come back. And so I knew that about the disease. I had done my homework. That's very important for you to do for whatever kind of dementia your loved one has. Learn about the specifics of that dementia, because almost half of dementias are not Alzheimer's, or they're mixed. And so you need to educate yourself so that you're equipped to handle situations better. So anyhow, on this day, me knowing that things could come and go, and that John had been able to speak before this, he had gibberish just coming out of his mouth. And so I was able to say to him, John, when I looked in his eyes, this is important, I looked in his eyes and I could tell that he knew what he wanted to say. And so I just took him by the hand and I said, John, I want you to know that I know what you're trying to say right now. But right now, Lewy is messing with the connection between your mouth and your brain. Lewy's messing with that connection. If you will just close your eyes, go to sleep, get some good rest, when you wake up, you're going to be able to say whatever you want to say. John quickly closed his eyes and he went off and took a nap. And when he woke up, he was able to speak again. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen every time. I'm saying in this situation where I knew what was going on likely with this disease, I knew it was likely a temporary thing. I assumed the best. I assumed that it was. Shared that with John. Did not become upset or overwrought or tense in any way. I simply reminded him that I was his second brain, reminded him that Lewy was doing this, and that he had some control over the situation if he would just take a nap, let his brain clean itself out, because that's what happens when we sleep. Our brain clears itself of some clutter, and that he was probably going to be fine. He was able to relax. He didn't have any of those stress hormones that would have come upon him and become a big part of the story if I had handled that differently, if I had overstressed about it. And he had picked that up, even from the expression on my face, because they read us very, very well. They read our body language. They read our facial expression. And so I just used this technique of personifying Lewy, separating it in my own mind, separating it for John, and nurturing him and informing him about what was likely going on. It turned out well for us. So this is another example of how personifying the disease and using this as a way to outsmart the monster works. The level of trust that we had was also a big part of that story. Let me remind you one more time of the five things that I hope that you will embrace: being positive, proactive, perceptive, persistent, and personify that disease. Give it a name, separate it from your loved one, nurture your loved one, outsmart Lewy. Take care. God bless you. You are a hero. You are doing good work every day. Thank you so much for what you do to help your family, your loved one, and our whole community. Have a good one.